active, should I? Yeah, it's active. Thank you very much. So, bonjour à tout le monde. Merci d'être ici, merci de l'invitation. Je dis quelques mots en français, juste pour politesse envers les gens ici dans la salle qui parlent français, mais I will shift to English, because if I have to choose, I would choose Spanish or Italian for chairing this meeting, but it's impossible because some of us will understand each other, but not the others. So, let's continue in English. What is the goal of this session is to try, starting from the reflection we had and we shared this morning, start to see how to put in place the action related to those concerns. I mean, we've spoken about the threats we have to civic space, to democracy, to peace. And our role is to, we always say, to work for justice, for development, sustainable development, but all the concerns related to development are in fact converging towards that symbol. And you see, I have to appreciate publicly our friends from Canada that used for the logo of the C20 the dove of peace, that uses the maple leaf, you say like that, no, for your national flag, to give wings to the dove. If you attended the process last year, you saw that in the logo of the C7 in Italy, we designed a dove, the dove of peace. And it was interesting because the olive branch was not in the mouth of the dove. The olive branch was a bit far, and the dove was flying. Because to have peace, you can't just call for peace. You have to act. You have to build a peace. And it is very, very, very nice, very good, even emotional for us, seeing that our Canadian friends continued the new logo, to continue in repeating this message, because what we are doing now is building peace. It's not making some technical reflection on how much we can increase by 0.02 the indicator 29B of the 2030 agenda, but it's together to put efforts and share resources and energies and even pain to build and to protect peace. So we've listened how difficult it is to protect peace in this moment, or not how difficult it is, but how strongly is threatened the peace and the democracy in the world. So the reflection we want to share this morning in the second part is how, starting from the experience we have from different point of view, from different kind even of civil society organization, we can share indication about how to move to strengthen our call. And we have Aoi, I always miss your family name, Hirochi, is it right? Not exactly, not perfectly, but he will say better than me. Aoi is a very good friend for a long time, but this is not relevant. What is relevant is that he has a very long, long experience in attending the global space of participation of civil society and in facilitating these spaces when these have been hosted in Japan. He was the sous Sherpa of the C20 some years ago, and he was the Sherpa, you were the Sherpa last 2 years ago when the C7 was hosted in Japan. Then we have Kate Gillis. I say that. And she's, the name is National Council of Métis. This is something that for people who don't come from Canada is not really familiar. But I think that all the people that, like me, went to Canada just yesterday learned about First Nation, Métis, and Inuit. Learned about this, may I say, wonderful diversity and plurality of this nation that is, of this country that is hosting us. And having Kate is interesting to share with her the point of view that comes from a specific component of this diversity. Because peace has to be built together by all and not just by someone with guns and power or money says, we do that, you do that, and that is peace. And then we have Arjun Karki. Don't believe me when I pronounce names. Yeah, and he is from Federation of Rural Organizations in Nepal, and he is also the leader of an international organizations of non-governmental, the International Federation of Non-Governmental Organization from less developed countries. And with these three persons, we can combine, I repeat, a different point of view and experience. And I would like to start with a first general question. That is, we already shared the question. It is everything prepared. Starting with the awareness that we are in the middle of a polycrisis. This crisis is not only affecting the democratic spaces and peace, is affecting several dimensions of our social life, the economic life. We can think about the energetic crisis, the food crisis. We have a lot of crises. We know that. I won't mention them. But I want to ask you, remaining this general approach, how do you see a space for civil society, and what you see as tools and as strategies for civil societies to strengthening its capacity to influence the decision-making process? Thinking about that perspective, that is not just we deal with these aspects, we deal with in a comprehensive approach with a plurality of elements. So there are many difficulties in terms of synthesis, simplification of messages, capacity to be understood by decision makers and by the public. So can you share, starting from your personal experience, some suggestion on that, on this? Aoi, please start.
Thanks, Ricardo. Hi, my name is Aoi Horiuchi. I'm a senior advocacy officer of Japan Angel Center for International Cooperation, JANIC. Our organization is an umbrella network of Japanese civil societies working on development cooperations in different parts of the world. And as Ricardo mentioned, that I've been working as a C7 Steering Committee member since 2023, when the Japanese government hosted the G7 Hiroshima Summit. And since then, I've been involved, or I represent as a Japanese civil societies to C7 steering groups. So the first questions about how we can strengthen our efforts to advocate for the G7 leaders. Based on our experience in the past 2 years, I'd like to say that we have multiple approaches, or I mean, I say 2 approaches that we can take. The one is that we use this kind of opportunity like C7 Summit, I mean global opportunities to engage with the G7 leaders. Because we are coming from different parts of the world, and we collectively published this C7 Communiqué with different stakeholders, and we can present our collective voices to the G7 leaders, which is quite important. And as our Sherpa, Darlon, mentioned in the opening remarks, the C7 is not just a place to present our policy advocacy. It doesn't finish today. It's a continued process. So we can probably amplify our voices using this C7 Communiqué in different occasions. For example, when you meet with your government, when you meet with your constituency, or when you meet with your friends and colleagues in the communities, we can use this communiqué as our basis for advocacies. That having said, I'd like to say that the other approach is that we can mobilize ourselves in our own context, in local context or domestic context. When we back in in my countries, I'd like to meet with Japanese government, who will be responsible for the G7 summit, G7 Leaders Summit. We are still negotiating if we can meet with Japanese Sherpa, but we definitely would like to report what has been discussed here and present the C7 Communiqué to the Japanese government before the Leaders Summit. That's how we communicate with our own government. And I'd like to share one good example based on my experience. I'm here representing Japanese civil society, but in this venue, we have two colleagues from Japan, and they are quite active in the Humanitarian Action and the Peace Working Group. And they joined the working group discussions for the past several months, and we discussed internally among Japanese civil society that how we can represent our voices in the C7 summit. I'm one of the C7 steering committee, so I can be here with the support from the C7 secretariat. But those two, my colleagues, they don't have a fund. So we, as a civil societies, we organize a fundraising campaign to send two delegations from Japanese civil society to here. And actually this morning we did a live broadcasting for the Japanese audiences to explain what the discussion might look like at the C7 summit and what concrete policy recommendations we have created in each working group. And that fundraising campaign is still going, and with the support from diverse civil society in Japan, and especially not from the capital, but from across the countries, we can collect our voices and also mobilize funds so that we can surely represent the voices from civil society in Japan to these global opportunities. That's
Thank you, Aoi. Kate.
Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? We're a small enough group that you can talk back to me, which is so lovely. So I hope everyone enjoyed their break. If you didn't get one of those cookies, they are absolutely delightful. So would recommend.
But we organize meeting like that for have break and cookies, of course.
Well, of course, yeah. We intentionally picked this slot. We had no say on it whatsoever, but so people could get the sugar hit and then sit down and join us. But yeah, hi folks. As mentioned, my name is Kate Gillis. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for International Relations at the Métis National Council. And I know lots of us are coming from Canada and abroad. So if I may, I'm just going to actually take a step back and introduce the Métis National Council. So in Canada here, we have three distinct Indigenous peoples. We have First Nations, and Elder Vince this morning, who started us in a very beautiful way. He's First Nations, and then we have Métis, which is the community I come from, and then we have Inuit as well, as Ricardo mentioned to all of us. And The Métis Nation in Canada was constitutionally recognized as Indigenous peoples in 1982, and then in 1983, the Métis National Council, the organization that I work with, was established with a mandate to represent the Métis Nation both nationally and internationally. And so we've been around for 42 years now, small but, well, the MNC has been around for 42 years. The Métis Nation predates that extensively. But today, the Métis National Council has a number of policy portfolios. We do essentially anything and everything between economic development and trade, environment, emergency management and climate change, health, education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have a small but mighty team of about 30 to 40 people, and each of those people, you can imagine, does a lot of good work. And then my job at MNC as part of the Intergovernmental and International Relations Department is to essentially streamline and strategize with all of those departments on how to effectively engage in international spaces, and ensuring that all of our engagement internationally aligns with the priorities of Métis citizens on the ground. Our purview at MNC allows for us to engage across a number of different international fora, predominantly through the United Nations, and it really allows us to see the siloing that takes effect within the system. It's really just abundantly clear, I think, that no single movement can create transformative change on its own, and even the ones that have tried, like the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, have really lost momentum over the last couple years. So how do we do better? And I think that's what we're here to talk about over the next couple days, and I'm sure it's what we're all asking ourselves consistently. And when I think about these international institutions, at the core of all of them is a very targeted profile, and I always like to say that organizations like the UN, they weren't built for Indigenous peoples, they weren't built for women, they weren't built for youth, they weren't built for members of the LGBTQ+ community. And so the beauty of civil society, though, is that it was. And when we're talking about ensuring cross-movement solidarity, we need to remind ourselves of that. We, of course, all work within these institutions of sorts, and I find that even myself, I'm guilty of this. We're always still looking at this 30,000-foot down angle. And so I challenge you all to look internally and ask yourselves when the last time you actually sat down with youth or women or members of the LGBT community was. And when we're talking about amplifying these voices and ensuring equity and justice, it ultimately comes down to ensuring that those voices, the ones that are closest to the struggle, are also closest to the decision making. And I think that the Communiqué does a really good job at concisely recognizing all these different voices and experiences. I feel very privileged that I was invited by Cooperation Canada to join the steering committee this year and participate on this panel and another one tomorrow. And I do that in my role as a Métis woman, a Métis youth, and a community member and an Indigenous person here in Canada. And so I'll wrap it up for now and let the conversation go on, but just to offer my gratitude to Cooperation Canada and my distinguished panelists.
You've already answered, but may I ask you something in a sort of provocative way?
Please.
Is this an issue to occupy a space representing your personal community, ethnic group, etc., or it is a different issue? And this is something that it's good for everybody. I mean, we all, when we participate these kind of spaces, we have to ask ourselves if we are occupying a space to be able to say, I was there and I could influence, or is it a different perspective?
Yeah, I think loaded question on a number of different fronts. I think me as a person, I am very intentional about my engagement in these spaces, and I do so, and the reason that I took this position with MNC a few years back is because we never had a coordinated international portfolio within the organization. And so I told myself when I was taking that job, and I still adhere to this today in my day-to-day, but I want to ensure that when I'm in these spaces, I'm operating and responding in a way that represents my family and my community back home, and they can see themselves reflected in my work, and I can see them reflected in my work. So I take great pride in the opportunity to be able to participate in these spaces, and I try to do so in a good way that represents community. But the other end of that is a broader kind of accessibility piece, and I'll continue going back to the UN just because it is one of the systems that we actively engage in most regularly, I suppose. But it's no longer really that access is the problem. It's that it's increasingly hostile as an environment. And so I can use the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, for example, and they actually have a mechanism that's worked into the Paris Agreement and the convention text itself called the Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform, and it's an active mechanism to essentially enhance the participation of Indigenous peoples within the COP and UNFCCC space. And so there's a really large Indigenous voice within the UNFCCC process, but that doesn't mean that it's a friendly space. And we saw this, I was at COP29, pardon me, this year in Baku, and I don't want to get too far into the climate change question because I'll get there afterwards, but it's no longer really a question of access, it's how do we ensure that we're not only effectively and strategically leveraging spaces, but also how are we doing so in a safe way?
Thank you. Arjun, give us your perspective and suggestion.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you very much. I am very pleased and honored to join this panel, and I would like to thank organizer for inviting me and giving this opportunity to share my issues and concern. I am from Nepal. I represent an organization called Rural Reconstruction Nepal, but I am engaged in coordinating 3 different levels of organization. That is Rural Reconstruction Nepal at the country level, and I'm also part of the South Asia Alliance for Poverty Eradication, and I coordinate the LDC group of civil society and think tank as global coordinator of LDC was. There are 45 UN-defined least developed countries at this moment. So, how we can strengthen C7 is, in fact, G7 countries' policies and programs affects life of not only people live in G7 countries. They are the most influential group of countries, and their policy affects lives and livelihood of people living all over the world, and particularly those who are living in extreme poverty and also least developed and low-income countries. And their policy affects life of people, different people differently. For example, women, children, other marginalized group, people living in extreme poverty. They are disproportionately affected. So we live in a world where transformation is taking place with compounding crises and deepening inequalities. So G7 countries are also equally influential in various intergovernmental mechanisms. For example, United Nations, World Bank, regional development banks, and also they are part of the various regional bloc. For example, European Union. So it is very important for us to unite among ourselves at intercontinental level. There should be a global unity, not only engaging with the group and people who are in G7 countries. So we should really forge alliances among civil society group, activists, social movement, and also think tanks, people in academia globally, so that our voices are united and also heard by the most powerful group of countries and government. Thank you.
Thank you. I would say that. Let's take home a first lesson. First, we need coordination. Second, there is a plurality of spaces for civil society, and we have to strengthen the links among these spaces. For instance, a good habit that is happening in the last years is to have in the steering group of the C7 a representative of the C20 and vice versa. In this moment, I have to confess, C20 is facing a very big problem, but this link is relevant, but it hasn't been only between G7 and G20 civil society spaces. It has to be with BRICS, it has to be with the United Nations, basically, because United Nations, the multilateral dimension of United Nations is the fundamental space, because at the United Nations, we all feel at home. In the G7, Aoi and myself, we can feel home, but you know, because the G7 is not including you. And the same for G20. Our friend from Nigeria, how can feel at home when there is a meeting of G20? It is a little bit arrogant, this attitude of the groups that say, we are the big, the powerful, the whatever, I don't know. So we attend these spaces to try to influence, but the way we do is to involve and include and engage civil society from all over the world. So, and this element of coordination, due to the plurality of the spaces, is relevant. And the other element, I think, is the alliances between civil society and university. I think that the role played by academia and think tanks is absolutely relevant. Sometimes on several issues, academia slept, absolutely slept. And I say that I teach as well in university, and I do perfectly well that there are even interests that are playing a role in academia, because there are researchers that are paid by private sectors, and we have to wake up the academia, but a strategic alliance with academia is relevant. So now let's make another step. You all have, yeah, I'll leave it, never mind. Give a sight to the communiqué. There are a lot of interesting political demands. Let's take one element that is coming from the communiqué. That is what you mentioned before, Kate, the climate change. We all speak about just transition. Just transition has to do with the environmental dimension, but it has to do also with the technological transformation. It has to do with the change in jobs, in labor, in the way we work every day, using technologies or not using technologies, affecting the planet or not affecting the planet, etc., etc., etc. Now, there are very interesting experiences coming even from communities at the ground level. Can you, again, share some experience and some suggestion about good lessons that we are learning from that? I repeat, again, knowing and be aware about the complexity of the interlinks that we have between, or among, better said, climate change, social justice, reasonable use of resources, etc., etc., etc. Again, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ricardo. I'd like to speak about how the climate change and also community development or agricultural project interlinked in Bangladesh with the support from Japanese government. In one village in Bangladesh, the coal power plant is planned. Is built with the support from a Japanese aid agency. And that aid program is built by a Japanese company. But the local communities face severe economic situations because of the climate change and the drought, and also the hurricanes and typhoons hit the community, and they lost many lives and also livelihoods. And some of the civil societies working there had interviewed with the local community how the development program of coal power plant would benefit in the communities in Bangladesh. And the people there responded that we are not actually benefited from the development program of coal power plant. One is that there's no job to be created for the people there. The second is that climate change is increasing. I mean, it's happening because of the gases that power plant is producing. And even the electricities that they would produce will not be used in that communities. And the fisheries, the people who do fishings, are lost the way of their doing their business. So the Japanese aid agencies and also the construction companies think that this is quite important development project in the community of Bangladesh, but in fact, it was not. And we, I mean, as a taxpayer in Japan, do not know much about how the reality on the ground in Bangladesh. So one of our project, I mean, our colleagues made a video to highlight the effect of the community in Bangladesh and also the responsibilities of Japanese government and also public money, I mean ODA, if those money can be spent instead of creating another fossil fuel plant, but also how to rebuild the community resilience, especially in terms of the economic justice movement. So that's we are now trying to highlight the effect of development cooperations with public monies.
Thank you, Aoi. Kate, you have the floor, and I like to say that for people like me coming from Europe, it's absolutely interesting to listen to the experience and the vision of indigenous people. Indigenous community has a wisdom, I think is the word, the proper word, without maybe any academic background, in putting together in a comprehensive way the life of people, the life of the earth, and I think that listening each other can be very interesting in that sense. I know something, Patricia knows that, something about the culture of the indigenous people in Latin America, in the Selva and in the Andes, but maybe Kate, you can give us some elements also from your personal experience.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Ricardo. I realized that I started without telling you folks a little bit about where I'm from. So I was born and raised in Calgary, Alberta, which, as you all probably know, will be the airport that all the leaders fly into for the G7 leaders meeting that is happening in, how far out? 6 weeks now? Two months? Yeah. I was just reading a statistic yesterday morning, actually, that said that in Alberta, the province broadly right now, it's set to be the driest spring ever. And what this means is that we have the leaders from the G7 countries flying into Alberta right in the peak of fire season. I'm it's no laughing matter, it's not, but one side of me is like, okay, good, maybe if we get them all there, they can actually witness this firsthand and something can happen. Because of course here in Canada, we've seen increasing fires every single year, and at the same time, there's been a cut on funding within the province of Alberta to actually address forest fires in a good way. And furthermore, there's been actual policies put in place that on Indigenous lands in Alberta, the Indigenous communities aren't actually allowed to fight fires themselves. They have to wait actually for the provincial or federal jurisdictions to go in and fight those fires for them, despite having Indigenous knowledge on how to actually tenure the lands that predates time immemorial, right? And so That's just one example. If there is fires in Kananaskis that weekend of the Leader Summit, it wasn't me. It was the world. But yeah, that's just one example. And I talked a little bit about the UNFCCC, and I've had the privilege of attending a number of different COPs and subsidiary bodies. And I can tell you folks firsthand that a lot of time and energy and resources and funding goes into trying to find solutions without actually addressing the root cause, which is colonialism. And when we think about colonialism, we also have to think about terms like capitalism and patriarchy and all of the systems and structures that continue to uphold these constructs. And I'm bringing this all in today because I talked in my intro about working in silos, and from an Indigenous worldview, those silos can't exist. And each of those kind of injustices in today's world, we look at health inequalities, we look at economic injustice, we look at climate change, violence against women, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All those from an Indigenous perspective are direct results of colonialism. And Indigenous peoples have long understood that environmental health is inseparable from community well-being and cultural survival, economic autonomy, just to name a few. And one of the terms that I always go back to is Wahkohtowin. I'm going to spell it for you folks. I'm not a speller, but it's Wahkohtowin, Wahkohtowin. And it's a Cree term that roughly translates to kinship or we are all related. And there's no good English translation of the term because it really encompasses our relationships with one another, all four of us up here on the panel, all of us together in the room, but also our relationships with the lands, the waters, the earth, the animals, the spiritual realm, and essentially anything and everything in between. And these knowledge systems that we have, they emphasize balance, and that's not just between people and the land, but also 7 generations. I'm not sure how many of you folks are familiar with these 7 generations teachings, but it's essentially looking forward, my descendants in 7 generations, everything I do today is done so in a way that ensures that they're better off in, I don't know how many years that is, I'm not a mathematician by any means, but just working towards bettering those futures. And Kim actually talked about this earlier, is this intergenerational equity as well, and how do we get there? It's these conversations between generations, teaching that history, and I think we do a pretty good job at that within our Indigenous communities and within the Métis Nation, because that's actually worked into our governance structures. Elders and youth, they all play a role within our community structures and well-being. And so when we think about just transition, which it's the buzzword right now, right? Like 2 years ago, it was green transition. Before that, I can't even keep up with how many of these words. Just transition is my favorite so far, I will say that. But how do we get there? It has to be rooted in responsibilities and relationships. And I talked about not working in silos, and I don't have all the answers, of course, but one example that I wanted to share with you all was in April 2024, the Métis National Council published the Métis Nation Climate Change Strategy, and it's based on 5 priorities: nature stewardship, sustainable energy and infrastructure, emergency management and climate resilience, health and well-being, and economic development and prosperity. And just to kind of neatly tie together everything that I've been saying here, I'm going to read you folks a quote from the strategy. It says, "Economic self-determination for the Métis Nation is pursued with an understanding that the land and resources belong to generations of the past, present, and future. The Métis Nation strives to pursue economic development in a manner of reciprocity with the lands and its inhabitants at present and for the next 7 generations." And so as we continue these conversations across movements, across borders, across sectors, I hope that we can all remember that climate justice isn't just about technology or targets. It's actually about transforming these systems that brought us here in the first place. And that, of course, as I hinted at in my intro remarks, it involves making space for Indigenous knowledge, labor experience, community voices, and especially young people and future generations. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. Arjun. Arjun, give us some suggestion from the experience of the big network that you are facilitating.
Thank you. Ricardo, you have said that these crises we are talking about, or challenges, they are complex. But let's look at the other side of the coin, in fact. They are also very much interconnected. Our climate crisis, we talked about human rights, democracy, justice. All these issues are interconnected. And progress on one can depend on progress on others also. So we have to really look at these challenges from the perspective of integrated approach of development challenges that we face globally. So problem in one country or continent should also be concerned of issues in another country and continent. So basically, I have worked in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, if you like. So you see, let's take an example of climate crisis. So we all are affected by climate crisis. But different countries are affected differently. For example, country like Nepal, we have issues of Himalaya melting. If you travel to Pacific countries, we have issues of sea level rise. And if you go to country of sub-Saharan Africa, perhaps the desertification is a big issue. So same issue, but different kind of impact in different kind of continent. So the kind of development model and paradigm promoted by our government or national, international government, intergovernmental bodies are not really able to address these complex challenges. We need to really rethink, revamp the global strategy so that we can make it pro-poor, pro-people, and also we should have a just approach of development so that we can save people and planet.
Thank you. Right in the communiqué, one issue came up quite clearly, even if we didn't give to this topic a big space within the communiqué. But it's meaningful to have to share some ideas now. There is the dimension of technology that you mentioned before. We are all aware that climate change is one of the challenges, and climate change is a plural change, as you all said. No, the consequence that has, etc., etc. I don't repeat. But we have in front of us something that we don't already know very well, because it's moving, evolving, flexible. That is the development of technologies, particularly of digital technologies, and of course of artificial intelligence. What do you think could be relevant to keep in consideration thinking about the role that the evolution of technologies can play on our life, and particularly on social justice, on democracy, on peace, on the possibility to have a real sustainable development? Again, with the same order, Aoi.
Okay. As Ricardo mentioned, that we all, use advanced technology like digital ones, or AI, or maybe smartphones, computers. It might be quite popular that the metals is used, the rare metal is used in producing those smartphones and parts and computers, and we are quite heavily rely on the critical minerals coming from African continent, and we should wisely use the materials and also recycle it.
So-
And okay, and
No,
we,
yeah, I do agree.
no. And we also know that if we search any unfamiliar things using AI, they use a lot of powers and energies. And if we keep continuing using it, that would have a huge impact on the climate and also the CO2 emissions. So we should first definitely need to consider if we really need to we really need to use these advanced technologies. If we really need to buy new latest models every year or every month probably, and that is well actually the ordinary wisdom to that. But also speaking about the content or the things that AI or digital technology is producing, the thing that we should be taking into consideration is that if those new technologies is actually protecting human rights or privacies or any aspects that we should take care of, because once you use social media or AI, it means that you provide a lot of data to the AI companies or maybe in the data centers, and they collect all the data and they use it for their own purposes, especially for the profit. And we don't know how those data are collected or how data is processed, and also how those data are transferred or used for commercial purposes, because it's like in the black box, and we, as a users, we don't know the algorithm that behind the advanced technologies. That they might have some, the real effect in the social media discussions, for example, like discriminations or hate speech, So we should be quite mindful if those unregulated digital space is safe enough for everyone, or especially for the people in the vulnerable situations. So I think on the standpoint of civil society, we should always ask for the tech companies and also the governments who should regulate those new advanced technologies, if those technologies can safeguard the human rights, privacies, and etc.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I am by no means a tech expert at all. My phone screen time might say otherwise, but I developed my answer in support with my team, so sorry if I'm looking up and down a bit more.
But anyway, you have an iPad and a
Yeah,
digital
I
pen.
know, and my watch, everything.
So
I'm young, okay? Forgive me. I wanted to start with a metaphor. A real life example. My parents are both elementary school teachers back home in Calgary, and my dad called me a couple years back, and he said, "We just had the craziest staff meeting." And I said, "Oh, what? That could mean anything, right? Like you're dealing with 6-year-olds." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, we had a staff meeting about dealing with ChatGPT in the classroom." And I said, okay, well, how did that conversation go? And he said, well, people fell on a spectrum of, well, what is ChatGPT? And when they responded, oh, it's an AI mechanism, people said, what's AI? And then the other end of that spectrum was, well, so what, right? And anything and everything in between. And the common thread, though, within these conversations was, well, what do we do about it? And ChatGPT has been around for, 2-3 years now? I can't remember when this happened, but the school district that they work in, there's still actually no formal policy on how to deal with ChatGPT in the classroom. And I bring this up as an analogy today because I think it's reflective of these broader systems as well. And we see that policy is so far behind innovation. And oftentimes that means that people who are making decisions, these corporations and AI technical people and whoever else is involved in these conversations, it's oftentimes done so for profit. And of course, that leads to a number of different issues and challenges. And from an Indigenous perspective, of course, there's so much at risk here when sharing our traditional knowledge. And a big part of sharing Indigenous knowledge is doing so in a relational way. And I shared with you folks this just minutes ago, Wakotwin, that's one of the teachings that I grew up with. And I did that out of trust and sharing, right? And I just personally would be devastated if any of you went and put that into ChatGPT, despite me spelling it out for you. So please don't do that. Like we were talking about, is even if we do put that into these mechanisms, there's no way of knowing where that information goes, right? And it really takes away from the whole purpose of knowledge sharing to begin with. And so I have a couple points from my team. Just two, actually. The first point that they wanted me to share was we must move away from treating technology as neutral. Every tool reflects the priorities of its makers, and so the most pressing question that we should be asking at the C7 and encouraging our G7 counterparts to ask as well is who benefits and who is harmed? And the second, and arguably most importantly, is we need to change the narrative. Technology is not inevitable. It's a series of choices, like me choosing to come up here with my iPad, which I realize is super hypocritical, but we get to choose if these choices support justice, equity, and collective well-being, or whether they deepen the divides we're already fighting to close. And just to conclude, technology must first serve people on the planet, not for profit. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Arjun.
Thank you. In fact, this is very important question. In fact, technology plays complex role. Digital tools can empower communities and support climate action and expand access to information. But those technological tools can also be weaponized, deepening surveillance, spreading disinformation, and widening the digital divide. And particularly, people living in extreme poverty, living in a very remote place, and living in least developed country, people who are in living in small island developing state, landlocked countries are really issue. They have an issue of human right on accessing digital technology for the benefit of their life and livelihood. There is huge digital divide, and that doesn't allow them to access to technology that helps their life and livelihood. So there is no level playing field for them to compete with the international communities, people living in a different part of the world. So digital divide is also a huge human right issue in this science and technological arena. So when we make a policy or make innovation, we should really think of people who are living in a difficult situation. How these technology are going to affect young people, children, women, and also people who are living in the special circumstances. It's very important for us when we deal with the technology and innovation.
Thank you, Arjun. We have a bit of time for a couple of questions or consideration from the floor. So if anybody wants to ask something to the panelists or make some consideration of the topics that we touched, then I would like to have some final words from the three of you. But we have the time to a little contribution, please. Is there a microphone that can go?
My question is...
Can you introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, sorry. My name is Minaz Kirawala. I'm from Development and Peace Caritas, Canada, based in Montreal. My question is it time to start thinking of technology and the streams that feed into the development of technology as strategic resources, in the sense that there is a broad consensus in civil society that sectors like water, healthcare, electricity should be in the public domain? Is it time to start thinking in the same way of technology? Because a lot of the fundamental research that fed AI was developed in publicly funded universities and then was privatized not only for profit, but for mass murder in Gaza right now. So is it time for the public to take back control of technology in the way that we insist on, like I said, water and healthcare being in the public domain?
Thank you. Zia? Over there.
So thank you. I'm Zia from Pakistan Development Alliance, and I'm also representing Asia Development Alliance. Thank you for the wonderful conversations. While you were referring to this communique again and again, I had also had the look at that, and I'm really very much impressed by the preamble of this communique. It's very interesting. And it's my third time that I'm attending C7. So I really appreciate that this G7 forum is a forum of 7 top most great nations of the world. And, you know, and they are the decision makers. Now, all the time they make the decisions, it affects like the whole world. It affects us. It affects the marginalized communities, the indigenous people. It affects everybody in the world. And C7 is supposed to be actually facilitating the G7, you know, asking, making sure that the voices of the people should be reaching out to those G7. And at the same time, I believe that we are also bound to hold them to account. So, and I'm not sure that we are also celebrating the 50th anniversary of C7 like G7. But if yes, what we are celebrating for? Do we have any repository of some of the success stories that we have actually influenced and made G7 to act upon? Because to my belief, I think we are here to connect and to reflect and to celebrate and then act. So what we are, the celebration part is missing actually. You know, we are acting time and again. But what is with us for the celebration? So is there any repository of some of the success stories at the end of C7 and maybe at the end of G7, which has very, very positively affected us in this whole process? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Zia. There is a question over there. And then, yes, he asked for, you wanted to? Yeah, he asked first. Then we go to this side. I only ask you to be very short so we can conclude on time.
Thank you. I'm William Goes from Migrant Forum in Asia. Thank you, Oi, for the presentation and for telling us of your process in Japan. Are you aware of a similar process with C7 partners, civil society partners in the other C7 countries? And how do you all as C7 countries during the year, how do you all connect?
Okay. Let's collect the last 2 questions or intervention. There was 2 persons. Raise your hand so we can see them. 1 and 2. Okay. Okay.
I'm Harjeet Singh from Sadat Sampada Climate Foundation, also associated with the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative. And sorry for coming in again. And I'm tempted to say a few things about the title. And I think we need to talk a little bit more about, I know, Ricardo, you did mention about the polycrisis. I don't think polycrisis actually communicates very clearly the systemic nature of several crises that we are facing at this moment. So we should refer to it as a systemic crisis much more than polycrisis. I think it's also important to highlight that today in this world, whether it's global north or global south, we are facing challenges because of the model of development that we have created, the kind of financial systems that we have created. We are talking a lot about technology. We know all about the corporate greed and so on. So I think what we need, if we're really talking about bridging movements, we need to have a very honest reflection. And I can tell you, coming from the global south, particularly from the climate space, civil society has been a lot more divided when it comes to the perspectives from the global north and global south. It's only recently we are coming together a lot more than in the last 30 years, and that's why we are facing, Kate was referring to UNFCEC, and I can talk a lot more, which I won't do here, but the fact is we have been deeply divided. Now, coming to positive, I think we should do a lot more sharing, not just between G7, but G7 and the Global South. There's a lot more that G7 knows, the fallouts of the kind of privatization we have seen, the kind of corporate power, which we see in many parts of G7, but then there are also positive examples of civil space and social protection. I think if we really want to bridge movements, we need to do a lot more sharing of that. Kate, you talked about just transition. European Union understands what just transition is. They're practicing it in their part of the world. But when they come to UNFCEC, they totally forget about it.
Sorry, we are running out of time.
I'll just take 10 seconds to conclude.
Okay, 10
so
seconds.
what we need is a shared narrative of the world where we can learn from each other and we can promote well-being, equity, rights, and justice, because there are certain things that Global North has suffered from, and we in the Global South can learn from those examples. I think that shared narrative and sharing to me is a lot more important if we really want to bridge movements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One last intervention? Okay, so I leave to you immediately in flash. Can you tell something, both in answer, both in conclusion of this good panel?
Okay, thanks for the comparison of the past C7 summit. I would say that, of course, every C7 has different occasions, different opportunities. For example, 2 years ago in Japan, we were able to meet the G7 chair, Japan's prime minister at the time, with the presence of C7 steering committees and also global member of C7 different working groups. And last year, the Italian Sherpa attended the C7 summit. And this year, again, the Canadian Sherpa is expected to be here tomorrow. And what is different from last year is that we also have representatives from different embassies in Ottawa, so that we can directly present the C7 Communiqué to other G7 countries, apart from the chair, which probably create a moment for us to further communicate with the embassies and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in our own countries, and we can also convey our voices and concerns in different way. So that's, I think, how C7 is evolving. And with that, the past experience, we can also continue our process for the next and beyond.
Thank you, Aoi. Kate?
Yeah, thanks everyone for the questions and for your participation today. Couple reflections. First on utilizing AI and tech, just really quickly. I don't know how in my job I can. And if you have solutions, I would really much like to hear them. But our work is so grounded in community knowledge and sacred knowledge that I can't go and put that into a tech system where I don't know where it goes after that. And so I think that we should be taking back these systems but I don't know how personally I can in my role. So I would love to discuss more. And then just in terms of what are we celebrating, what is worthy of success? This is my first C7 meeting, but I challenge you all, I think, to, in today's very divisive global setting where something new happens every single day, it's a very defeating environment overall. And I think that just being able to gather all here together over today and tomorrow, that's success. And I'll just conclude quickly by, I really liked the first conversation that happened this morning on what is giving you hope and where do we find that. And I think that we're probably all in the same mindset right now of why are we still fighting? Why are we still doing this work? Why are we spending our 12-hour days, 24-hour days continuously like fighting what feels like an uphill battle? And I think the answer to that question is hope. And I wanted to add as well that when we're lacking that hope, that's when you go back to community. And when I go home and visit my community, visit my elders, visit my people, I have these hard conversations about, I don't know if what I'm doing is making a difference. And I can see like my great auntie, for example, and all she can think about is, oh my God, my great niece got to go to the UN. That's amazing, right? You got to speak on this panel, that's amazing. And so just challenging those narratives of what is success and what is hope and finding those where we can, because they're few and far between these days. So
Very good, thank you. Arjun?
Okay, thank you. As Ewa mentioned earlier, the G7 process is different in different countries. And the way I see this, I participated in several of them. For example, Japan, when Fukuda-san was prime minister. Where was that? That was in Hokkaido, right? Yeah, 2008, long back. The prime minister of Japan invited 7 civil society leaders from across the world to sit with his whole cabinet to listen civil society voice. I was one of them. But he invited people from one person from each continent. So I had that experience too. But I have also attended German and UK G7 process in the past. So my concern is, in closing, our big challenge is we have to explore how we can better connect the dots between sectors, movements, and the solution that we are talking about. We have C7, we have C20. We have G7, we have G20. We have G77 plus China. We have LDC group of countries, 45 countries. We have Africa group of countries. We have different kind of intergovernmental block, formal and informal. And we have also organized civil society groups representing various social movements along this line. And there are several initiatives and innovation to empower and strengthen social movement. But it's fragmented. Big challenge for us is how to connect the dot and build synergy out of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arjun. So now we are 3 minutes late. I am Italian. Italians are always late. So now I will make a conclusion in 20 minutes. Don't be afraid. But I would like just to say 3 things. First, we mentioned coordination and alliances. I think that in the last months, during your mandate, Paul and Aaron, you can try to deal with all of us, of course, to see how we can strengthen, maybe try to identify some rules to coordinate among all the spaces of civil society. proposing a sort of ordinary way to have shared participation between C7, C20, BRICS, UN, etc., etc., etc. We have good experience like the mechanism for FFD. Let's see how to strengthen that coordination. Second, let's remember that we have a fundamental role in terms of education, not in terms of schools, but in terms of education of the public, of our community, of the media, of our politicians. And several times the word came up, narrative is fundamental. The alliance with academia and think tanks for the knowledge, but then the translation in terms of good and positive and hope narrative. We have to tell that there are good things that are happening. There are a lot of horror happenings, but there are also a lot of good things. And this element of the narrative and the education, let's think about how we can influence the narrative of the media if we speak with them. And we have to speak also with the private sector. We mustn't be afraid of speaking with them. Otherwise, we will be in a wonderful room, speaking among us and not influencing anybody. And we will be traitor of our mandate. The third thing is technology and artificial intelligence. We have on finance the mechanism. We have on climate CAN and other global networks. Why don't we think, I repeat, Darren and Paul, to use the last months to starting an initiative of civil society at a global level to share ideas, concerns, proposals on technologies. We definitely need rules. The intervention you made is absolutely good. I totally agree with you. And the potential of technology is devastating if we look at the quality of the political debate, if we look about the dangers of fake news. Aoi spoke about the ownership of data. But it's not only the ownership of our health data, it's the way a narrative or a false narrative on politics, on the war. Let's look at the role of Elon Musk, being the owner of an issue like X. So we do definitely need, and there is, on that issue, let's look about Amazon. The market is something that normally happens in a square. And it's a major that set, and the municipal council, or you name it as you want to, that says that this is a public space, and everybody that respects the law has the right to go in that space and sell their goods and services. And everybody has the right to go there and buy. We can't do that in the digital dimension, because e-commerce is a private property of one man. And this is absurd. This is not free market. So let's create an initiative. This is my proposal, putting our strength together to have a global civil society initiative on digitalization, AI, on technology, etc. And then the conclusion is, thank you very much. I have to greet you all on behalf of Valeria, maybe who attended last year knows Valeria. Valeria was the Sherpa of the CV7 last year. She should have been today here. She was not able to come to Canada, so I'm just substituting her. And thank you to the panelists. Thank you for your attention. And let's have a wonderful lunch. Is this the next step? Daron, please.
In the back, soup, sandwiches, salads, and to Kate's delight, there will be some cookies there as well. So we'll be back here at 2 p.m. Yes, thanks. At 2 p.m. for the next session. So this morning was very, very interesting panels. This afternoon will be a little bit more participatory. So look forward to hearing from all of you in the afternoon. So thanks again. Another round of applause for our panel. And enjoy your lunch, it's in the back.